Hi, and welcome to my kitchen. Hi, Freda and Leah, thank you very much. I love it. Today's coffee break is about a great woman. Her name was Mrs. Friedman. When Faye, my very close friend, came and said, Miriam, I want to sponsor a piece from my mother's yard site on Yud Zayin Sivan, I said, Faye, you speak. Why? Because there's so many lessons we can learn from Mrs. Friedman, who graced this world for 101 years. And by the way, all of you know her. There's nobody in my audience that doesn't know either one of her sons or her grandchildren. They are Jewish music today. But before that, that family hat zu singen und zu sorgen. First of all, Rav Manis Friedman. I'm sure you've heard his lessons in Chassidus. If you haven't, look them up. Reb Avremel Friedman, or as you may know him as Avram Fried, who has lifted neshamas. Those are the sons. Reb Elik Friedman, Reb Ben-Zion Friedman, Shluchim in Eretz Yisrael and in the Midwest. What about grandchildren? So how about Benny Friedman, Yesh Tikva? Don't we all say it when things get a little... The Eighth Day, Eli Marcus, and in Eretz Yisrael, Simcha Friedman. And now I'd like to ask Faye to please come and give us concepts of what her mother was and still is to so many. Faye.
Thank you, Miriam. Sorry that you didn't mention me for my singing ability, but you know I can't sing, not even a note. Anyway, today, not today, but Yud Zayin Sivan is my mother's first yard site. My mother, Imi Mayrasi Miriam Tzimel Bas Yosef Barach. Allah HaShalom. It's hard for me to believe that it's already been a year, because half the time I find myself saying, oh, I must remember to say this to Mom. She's going to get a kick out of it, and then of course I remember. My mother loved Miriam. She always got a laugh out of her jokes, and about 2 years ago, Miriam actually came up to my mom's house, and we invited a few other elderly women, and Miriam sang with them. And she sang the song that is my mother's favorite in the world, the song that's called in Yiddish, Asudin You, the song about what's going to happen when Mashiach comes. And it was such a hit. Everybody loved it. And thank you again, Miriam, for that.
You're making me cry.
So where do I start? Not at the beginning. Not at the beginning in Russia. Those were difficult years. I'm going to start at the end. My mother was Zaycha, as Miriam said, to Arichas Yamin, Baruch Hashem. She lived to be more than 101, and she was fully present for all of those years. What a bracha is that? My mother began to figure out that she was getting old around the time that she turned 99. Before that, the thought never even occurred to her. Reading the Yiddish and English newspapers was always one of her greatest pleasures. And as she became really frustrated because as the years went on, she couldn't see. One day she tried to read a headline in the Allgemeine Journal with her trusty magnifying glass. And she said to me, I'm trying and I'm trying, but ich kann es nicht, I can't see it. And then she said it almost as if it was a strange thing to say. She says, you know what? Maybe I'm getting old. Nah, not my mom. At 99, she was just beginning. My mother still had a lot to do. In her last years, she developed a certainty, an obsession even, that Mashiach was take on his way. My mother only wanted to listen to songs about Mashiach. She did make an exception for Avram Fried once in a while. She only wanted to hear stories about Mashiach. She only wanted her great-grandchildren to sing songs about Mashiach. And she loved, like we said, that Sudden You song. My mother was an excellent writer and always wrote grammar poems for all of our simchas. She wrote in Yiddish and Lashon Kodesh and in English. Her spelling was flawless. We have no idea how she ever learned to read. She never went to an English class. Her spelling and writing was flawless in English. About 2 years ago, she actually wrote a poem about Mashiach without being able to see well enough to write. My mother would dictate it, and then she remembered what she said, and an hour later she'd come back and say, no, I want to change one line here. I want to change a word here. She actually remembered every line that she had written. And finally she had it to her liking, and when it was finished, she became obsessed with it. It was about what's going to happen when Mashiach comes, and she would make everybody memorize it. She would make everybody say it. She brought it into conversations where there was really no place for it. It was an obsession with her. Mom also taught her non-Jewish aides to say, we want Mashiach now, with an emphasis on the now. Everyone had to say it. She also taught them to say, Baruch Hashem. She would ask them, did you have breakfast this morning? If they said yes, she'd say, so say Baruch Hashem. Do you have a nice home to live in? Do you have good kids? Say Baruch Hashem. And they all did. And in fact, one of them once said to me, you know, at home today, I said Baruch Hashem to my husband, and he looked at me a little blankly. Mom was a tznuah to the nth degree, in dress, in speech, in thought. My mother never used a single word in her entire life that wasn't pure and appropriate. Both of my parents spoke with holiness. We never heard a bathroom word in our home, even when we were little children. My mother never spoke impulsively, and she exemplified the idea of machshava lefnei dibur, think before you speak. One thing Mom never did, ever, was to complain. I never heard her complain about anything in her life. When she came to help my sister and I all those years ago when we had our babies, she didn't complain about the rooms we put her in. She didn't complain about all the work she had to do. She didn't complain about going up the stairs many times a day like she did for me when I was after a C-section. And she wasn't young. My mother was almost 70 then. And she took care of us because we were Kimpeturns and we got VIP loving care. I wish that I could say that I'm the same when I go to my children, because I think I do complain sometimes if the pillow is not just right. My mother was the happiest of all when her children got together. She would just sit quietly at the table, didn't talk, just taking in the interactions between us. To my mother, every one of us had a talent. She would admire how this one could sing, this one speaks, this one tells jokes, or this one just sits quietly and listens. My mother was happy when we were together and enjoying each other's company, and that was her greatest joy. My mother taught us that when a person comes to the door to ask for tzedakah, we don't question if this is a good cause or a legitimate one. That's not my job, she always said to us. My job is to give, and she gave quickly before the mitzvah would slip away. When she came to my house once in Florida years ago, she met a neighbor of mine, an elderly Russian woman on the block. And one day when I told her I was having company, she said to me, are you inviting Ida? And I said, no, I'm having some friends come over. And she said, that's not Hachnosas Orchem, she says. That's pleasure for you. Hachnosas Orchem is when you invite somebody that doesn't have a place to go. And I got that message loud and clear. My mother was Muhuddar. It was well known that my mother was Muhuddar to light Shabbos candles well before the first siren goes off in Crown Heights. Friday afternoons in our home was always peaceful and calm. There was no last-minute rush because if it was 12 o'clock in the afternoon, to my parents, it was already Shabbos. To even think about going to a store after 12 o'clock was like anathema. Absolutely not. On Shabbos, where are you going? So I once mentioned many years ago in a speech at a Kinnis HaShluchos, it was about another topic altogether, but I mentioned how my mother lights her candles and that it is always peaceful in our home Erev Shabbos. Ad hayom hazeh, up until today, other shluchos will come over to me and they will say, I still remember what you said about your mother all those years ago, about her lighting candles early, and I still try to do that today. My mother, Kinahara, had an impact on people whom she never met. In her later years, and right up to her last days, people began coming up to her home for brachas, to get brachas from her. My brother and sister-in-law live downstairs, my brother Shlomi and Bracha, two very incredible people. Their home is always filled with orchem, with guests from around the world. But no visit is complete without a visit upstairs to see Bubby Friedman. No matter who it was, from, not from, old, young, women, children, teenagers, my mother always had just the right words to say to all of them. She took an interest in their lives. She asked about their jobs, their profession, the schools that they go to. And everyone went away with a bracha, feeling as if they had just been in the presence of royalty. And they had been. I want to end by reading one piece of my mother's poem, the one I told you about that she wrote about Moshiach. The final stanza goes as follows. Halavai, soll schon kommen die richtige Schar, als alle wollen wissen und alle wollen sehen, als Moshiach is schon da. I translated it very roughly into English. This is what it means. Hopefully, may we come to that long-awaited day when everyone will agree and everyone will see that Moshiach is here to stay. Amen.
Faye, that was beautiful. Itta, did you think I would forget you? She's a shlucha in California. And Shlomi downstairs is incredible. And Yossi and all of you are unbelievable. Your mother, I'm sure, is very, very, very proud of you. I'll tell you one thing I remember from your house, Faye. There was never a loud word. With the house full of kids, Baruch Hashem, never was there a loud word. Never was there a word that wasn't edel. May we learn from Mrs. Friedman. And remember, she wasn't old until she was 99. So let's enjoy our life and let's do what we're supposed to. Seid gesund, bewirchas Mashiach now. And again, sie soll sein a gute Wetter für ihr Mishpoche und für Klal Yisrael. Thank you very much.